The population on this planet has increased to 8 billion people total. So this is a big deal. The global population in just 12 years grew by 1 billion. And so there are some ramifications to that, of course, because of the fact that the planet can take so much of human activity. But before we discuss those downsides, I do want to talk about what these findings indicate and how the population has grown over the last 12 years. So in their announcement of the so-called Day of 8 billion, the United Nations wrote this: "This unprecedented growth is due to the gradual increase in human lifespan owing to improvements in public health, nutrition, personal hygiene, and medicine. It is also the result of high and persistent levels of fertility in some countries." So the countries that they're referring to tend to be lower income countries, and it's due to the fact that women there don't have the same access to family planning, or they might not have reproductive rights, much like women in red states are experiencing here in the United States. And so in terms of global trends, countries with the highest fertility levels tend to be those with the lowest income per capita. Global population growth has therefore over time become increasingly concentrated among the world's poorest countries, most of which are in sub-Saharan Africa. And much of the population growth is moving forward, is expected to come from nations in the global south, okay? So middle income countries, mostly in Asia, accounted for most of the growth over the past decade, gaining some 700 million people since 2011. India added about 180 million people and is set to surpass China as the world's most populous nation next year. So before I move on to the climate crisis and how this all plays into it, Cenk, why don't you weigh in?
Yeah, so I used to say that we tripled the world's population in views, but now that it's going to be at 8 billion, we've got to go from 22 to 24 billion. So it's going to take us a little longer now.
The story is really just about us.
It really, I wanted to focus on what was the important part of this. So those are lifetime views. All right, now seriously, good, God bless. I'm not in the camp of like, oh my God, there's too many people. No, I've read 1,000 times about how it's going to peak, and there's logic behind it, and it's natural, it's normal, and as you're gonna see, it peaks at around 10 billion.
But why? No one really explains that.
Oh, there's a number of reasons why, but one of them is that people, as time goes on, more people become middle class throughout the world. So in China, for example, the middle class has exploded over the last 10, 20 years. And when folks get richer, they have less kids. So that is a rock hard fact. Does it happen in every instance? Of course not. There's a great variety in humans, but does it happen in a macro sense in almost every nation, in every culture? Yes. So as some countries like China get wealthier, they have a lot less kids on average. Now, of course, China was skewed by the one-child policy, so they're not the best example, but it happens in every nation. So, and there are other factors involved too, but at some point, you get to a place where you start to lose population. That's part of the reason why the right-wingers here in America are flipping out, because white people aren't having that many kids in America anymore, whereas poorer immigrants that are coming in have more kids per capita, per family. So that's why they're like, oh, they're trying to replace us, etc. No, the reality is once they get here, eventually 1 to 2 generations later, they will have the same exact number of kids as we do.
I know,
on average.
But we're making the assumption, not we, those who think the population at some point will peak are making the assumption that some of these lower income countries will have this explosion of a middle class, when that's not necessarily true.
But again, that's not the only factor, Anna. So, and by the way, so if we had a resource problem, well, then that would shrink the population, which happens a lot throughout human history, happened a lot throughout human history. Why? Limited resources means we fight and we start to kill each other. Let's be clear. So that's when I say, I'm telling you the good news as to why the population controls itself sometimes, but there's also the bad reasons why it controls itself. And then you get back to a point where you have a limited population that can handle the amount of resources that we have. So issue of, do you have more resources to keep up? And then when people get rich, they stop having that many kids, or you have less resources, but then a lot of people die in the wars, and then you have less people for either way. Again, I'm oversimplifying here, but those are the general concepts that lead to a plateauing of the population. It's not going to go for, I believe in scientists, and I think they make a compelling case if you read all of it. So I don't think it's going to go to 20 billion, 30 billion, et cetera. And if they did, by the way, those would also be human beings that we should protect.
No, exactly, yeah, and so I want to be clear about something. On this planet, there are limited resources, right? And so when you think about the climate emergency, which is very much real, I think people make the mistake of thinking that the population growth, which is obviously pronounced in lower income countries, is contributing to that. But in reality, when you look at the countries and the individuals and the industries that are contributing to the climate emergency the most, it's not people in sub-Saharan Africa.
In fact,
it's not even close.
In fact, I'll give you facts that are in my book. And yes, it's going to come out all the way in September, but you can pre-order now, justicescomingbook.com. For every one American, we create as much climate change, carbon, et cetera, as 7 people in China and 168 people in Bangladesh. So if you really wanted to limit climate change, you would limit the number of Americans. Being an American, I don't agree with that, and I don't want to do that.
We don't need to limit anything.
Exactly.
Okay? What we need to do, in my opinion, is empower people to make the right choice for them when it comes to family planning. And where we're seeing the explosion in population growth, women don't have that.
Yeah, family planning by an order of magnitude is the most important in helping with this issue of the larger population leading to larger climate change. So if you're the right winger blaming Bangladesh, you're crazy. We create a lot more climate change than they do. And if you're a right winger saying, hey, no, I want everybody to have as many kids as possible because I think God said it to a Bush 2,000 years ago. Okay, but you're making the problem way worse. You shouldn't force family planning on anyone, but if they want that option, by God, let's give it to them. It's actually one of the most effective ways that we can tackle climate change and many other problems in the world. And you're helping them by giving them more choices.
Absolutely.